Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. We are coming to you live this afternoon, September 5th. It is officially NFL game day, as tonight we have the season opener between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. So the wait is finally over. We have some real regular season football to analyze. But before we do that, obviously, we have to do the previews of the game. And so we are going to be talking about the keys to the game tonight, some of the betting lines and such that are going to be surrounding the game. And additionally, we will be diving into some of the key factors as well as the fantasy football implications for this game in particular. Who should you be looking to start or sit in your fantasy league? We will be answering those types of questions. And then once we are finished with that, we will be looking at a broader view of this upcoming season in the NFL. I will go through and talk about my season predictions for all 32 NFL teams and talk about my list for the top 7 playoff contenders in each of the 2 conferences. And then additionally, we will be previewing the awards for this upcoming season during the regular season, talking about Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, all the way to MVP talks. So we will be discussing that as well. And then finally, we are going to talk about some of the key questions that remain headed into the NFL season and talk about what we could learn from week 1 regarding those questions. So a whole lot to dive into, but before we do so, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in the sports world, whether it is a quick comment or a thoughtful question. We here at the GSMC Sports Network thrive off of the interaction with our fans, and if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can use the super chat button that is now available on YouTube. By just clicking the $sign, you can leave a tip or donation along with a comment to get it to pop up on screen for everyone to see. Or you could go to the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker, that is gsmcpodcast.net. Either way, anything would be very greatly appreciated. As we mentioned, tonight is, of course, the season opener for the 2024 NFL season, and we have a rematch of the AFC Championship game from last year between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, last year, it was the Chiefs coming out on top in what was a bit of a defensive matchup, but I do feel like there is a strong possibility that we could see this game sort of go in a different direction in terms of both teams having a little bit more firepower offensively and both teams losing some key players on the defensive side of the ball. We'll start with, of course, the reigning champion Kansas City Chiefs. They last year were doubted for a lot of the season because of the fact that their offense lacked that dynamicism that we saw for many years with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Last year, Kelce was a little bit more limited during the regular season, whether it was him just trying to save himself for the playoffs. And I also think that a very real part of it was the fact that he is now older. It was his age 34 season last year. It looked like he maybe lost half a step. Now, obviously, the playoffs would say otherwise, as he was excellent then. But I think that ultimately, when we're looking at what type of production you can get from Kelce moving forward, I think it's going to be more limited in the regular season. And how did the Chiefs adjust to that? They went out and they added some additional playmakers on the perimeter. They were able to draft wide receiver Xavier Worthy with their first-round pick this year. Worthy is somebody that for a while was sort of mocked to the Chiefs for the fact that he has a little bit of Tyreek Hill to him, specifically the younger Tyreek Hill, before I think that Hill really developed as a savant of the game from an IQ standpoint as well. When he stepped foot in the league, he was a burner, and that's exactly what Xavier Worthy is. He was able to break the NFL Combine 40-yard dash record, and he showed on the field as well during his time at Texas that, yeah, no doubt he is a burner. So that's somebody that the Chiefs are hoping they can stretch the field a little bit more with Worthy. Last year, they lacked the presence of explosive plays throughout, and Patrick Mahomes is more than capable of putting together methodical drives, but at least keeping the opposing defense disciplined and forcing them, I should say, to play a little bit further back in the secondary, not give opposing teams the opportunity to crowd the line of scrimmage quite as much. So Worthy could definitely be in for a big rookie season. And then they also made the move to sign free agent wide receiver Hollywood Brown, another player that we know if there's one thing he can do, it is run fast. So there are these speed receiver options on the perimeter to complement what was a very promising rookie season from Rashee Rice last year, and Rice is hoping to be a little bit more of the intermediate game and be able to, just be the more reliable hands and be in the right places receiver. Plus they have these extra weapons on the outside to be able to, provide different types of looks for the Chiefs is going to be massive. This could be a year that we see the Chiefs lean more heavily into the run game as well. Isaiah Pacheco has been very impressive since really coming along with the Chiefs. One of the more fun running backs in the league, in my opinion. So again, the Chiefs, I do think, should take a step forward this year. Last year reached new lows in terms of relative speaking here. New lows for the Chiefs offense is not the lows of other NFL teams, but in terms of scoring offense, it was the first time I believe they were outside of the top 10 during the Patrick Mahomes tenure in Kansas City. So ultimately, I think we'll see some steps forward there. On the Ravens side, it's more about just adding that more reliable running back because they've had a number of different players over the course of the past couple seasons. Last year, we did see some flashes from rookie running back Keaton Mitchell before he ended up getting injured for the second half of the season. They were more so relying on the likes of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, J.K. Dobbins as well, even though he was also dealing with injuries. That as much as, there are some talented players in there, versatile as well, being able to be a part of the running and passing game, they were lacking the real bruiser in the middle, and that's where they decide to make the move to sign Derrick Henry to a free agent contract, and you put together a backfield that has Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That is nightmare fuel for opposing defensive coordinators, considering the fact that the Ravens were already last year the number one rushing offense by a significant margin, and it only got more difficult. It is going to be, in my opinion, more difficult to stop the run of the Ravens this upcoming season. But like I mentioned, it's not just that both of these teams got better on offense from when they last met in the AFC Championship game. Some key losses on both sides where the Chiefs ended up having to trade L'Jarius Sneed, their number one cornerback, one of the best corners in the game. So now he's in Tennessee. The Ravens had to let Patrick Queen walk in free agency, one of their starting linebackers from last year. Both of these players make a massive difference. I think the Chiefs are more impacted by the departure than the Ravens are for Queen, considering the fact that the Ravens have 3 stars at each level, in my opinion, of that defense. Justin Madubuike up front. They still have Roquan Smith at linebacker, and Kyle Hamilton, in my opinion, is the best safety in the NFL. So ultimately, I think that the Ravens defense is still going to be really good from a talent perspective, but that being said, they did also notably lose defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, who was hired as a head coach in Seattle, known as one of the bright defensive minds in the NFL, took some key assistants with him as well, so it could potentially take a little bit of time for this defense to really fully reestablish themselves. But either way, these are two of the top contenders in the NFL. I think when you look at this matchup last year, both of these teams, great defenses, a little bit more susceptible in the run, which would sort of favor in this type of a situation the Ravens. Now, ultimately, that was the case last year, and that didn't end up taking place. That was a bit of, in my opinion, a misplay from Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator of the Ravens, and the overall process of how they went about that game and their approach. But even still, I do think that with both of these teams, we are going to see some really impressive quarterbacks, two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, working against some stellar defenses. Now, some other things to take into consideration as well. We mentioned that the run game is going to be prominent. And I think that one of the biggest things for me, and especially when we are looking at the Chiefs who are hoping to three-peat this season, is they have one sort of key change on the offensive line. That is that their second-round pick from this past season, Kingsley Suamataia, he is now the starting left tackle for Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs team, which obviously, you talk about Mahomes, the Chiefs need to do everything they possibly can to protect him. He's more than fine at improvising and keeping himself safe as well, but now knowing that you have a rookie blindside tackle for Mahomes, that is going to be a really big deal. Everybody's eyes are on Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs coming from the 2024 draft class, but Suamataia is going to be the most important rookie for the Chiefs, hand down in my opinion, because they already have other options as pass catchers with Travis Kelce, with Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown that ultimately, if it takes Xavier Worthy a little bit of time to develop, I don't think that that is crippling for the Chiefs, but the offensive line has underratedly been a huge strength of the Chiefs the past few seasons, and I think it has a great opportunity to be so once again. They're also getting Joe Thuney back, their starting offensive guard who missed the Super Bowl last year, so the ground and pound game is going to be important in this game, and just the overall play of that offensive line moving forward here for the Chiefs is going to be massively important. And while we're on the topic of rookies on the other end, with the Baltimore Ravens, they decided to use their first-round pick on former Clemson cornerback Nate Wiggins, who really shined during preseason, got injured as well, did allow a touchdown in that first game, so it wasn't all flawless and smooth during training camp, but Nate Wiggins took a massive leap from the 2022 to 2023 season while at Clemson, and now he's hoping to take that leap once again to be a star corner with the Ravens. Now, they already have Marlon Humphrey, so it's not like I'm anticipating Wiggins to have to match up against opposing teams' number ones every single game, but he is going to have his footprints on this upcoming season, or at least that is the hope for the Ravens, because if not, I'm not going to say things get dicey for them just yet, but I think that Wiggins could have a very impactful roles for the Ravens this upcoming season. Now, really quickly here, just looking at some of the lines, the Chiefs are favored by 3 in this game, according to ESPN Bet. The total is 46.5. I'm going to probably stay away from the total. My general thoughts on that is that 46.5 I think is very achievable for the over. Again, 2 great defenses from last year, and there is also the adage that it usually takes offenses a little bit longer to work their way into a rhythm than it does defenses. So I definitely would not definitively say I love the over in this game, but that is probably the direction that I would lean in this. you got two teams that are hoping to establish a little bit more of a ground and pound attack this upcoming season, and that is a little bit of the weaknesses, especially as well. You look at the Chiefs, they lost L'Jarius Sneed on the outside, but Willie Gay was also a pretty key member of that Chiefs team last season as well. He is now in New Orleans, so things shaken up a little bit. Ultimately, I mean, this line moved. I believe at the beginning of the week, it was the Chiefs by 3.5. Now with it at 3, I really don't feel great about it either way. On Fridays for the remainder of the season, I'll be giving official picks to keep track of throughout the course of the year, so I would not like this one to be on the record for me. But that being said, if I had to go either direction, I think that ultimately, I mean, I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this game, which I don't feel great about. I think they can cover the 3 ultimately. A spread that small feels like it's going to be they either win or they don't. And, they will cover that 3. But I think that if I had to pick a direction, I would go Chiefs -3. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, as I want to continue on with this game as well, and I want to talk about the fantasy football implications of this game. So we will be diving into what does this season look like in terms of the red zone splits with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, who is going to get the majority of the rushing touchdowns for them. On the other side, who on the Chiefs can emerge for a solidified second option behind Travis Kelce. We will dive into that and more, but first we will be taking a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news if it's some losing shit. A stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as I want to continue on the conversation about tonight's matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and Baltimore Ravens, but I want to look at it from an angle of fantasy football, because obviously 'tis the season now, and a lot of leagues are, ramping up now, obviously, at this point. And I want to talk about what differences we could see from the skill position groups from both the Chiefs and the Ravens this season in comparison to what we saw last year. And I believe the most interesting fantasy football conversation for this game is what is the usage of Lamar Jackson versus Derrick Henry in the rushing game going to look like in the red zone. I think at least for this game, the Ravens are going to try and show off their new weapon in Derrick Henry, and I think that he will get these goal line touches, if anything, at least for the idea that the Ravens can put on film for opposing teams that they have multiple threats in the red zone. In years past, Lamar Jackson has done the heavy lifting in the running game, even though we have seen other running backs pop up for them, of course. But I think that now with this investment into a bruising back, which is really a new development for this Ravens team specifically, that I think that they will, again, try and prioritize getting Derrick Henry looks in order to, one, sort of work his way into the offense and build some confidence there, but also, again, just to show opposing teams that they have to prepare for multiple different outcomes, which could, again, just sort of give defensive coordinators a little bit less rest, I should say, knowing that there are multiple ways that the Ravens can hurt you in the running game. So I think that Derrick Henry is an excellent play for tonight. And generally speaking here as well, I think that outside of the red zone alone, I'm expecting the Ravens to come out with making the run game a priority. Last year when we saw these two teams in the AFC Championship game, the Chiefs were the number 2 scoring defense in the league during the regular season, but if there was any area they were susceptible, it was in the run game. They were 17th in rush yards allowed per game last year. The Ravens didn't really take advantage of that at all. They sort of insisted to go through the passing game. I'm not sure what the thought process behind it was. Maybe it was to give Lamar Jackson his sort of playoff moment that we've all been anxiously waiting for. But Ravens ran the ball just 16 times, and Lamar Jackson was half of the rush attempts. Part of that conversation as well is maybe the fact that they just didn't feel all that comfortable with the running backs that they had. It was Gus Edwards and Justice Hill that they were honestly more impactful, in my opinion, in the passing game than anything that they got done on the ground in that game. But that being said, I think that was an area they probably should have tried working a little bit harder there. And ultimately, I think that that's probably something that Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator, has been losing sleep about a little bit over the course of the past handful of months since that game. And I think that now with a weapon like Derrick Henry, they are going to try and just run down the Chiefs' throats and see if they can just sort of fatigue out that defense that, again, is very good, but did see a key loss in Willie Gay as well and L'Jarius Sneed on the perimeter that I feel like they're going to try and establish this game and their overall identity in the trenches. Now, the Ravens did lose a couple starting offensive linemen, which could be a little bit of a concern as well, so we have to at least acknowledge that. But I think that this is the direction that the Ravens are going to try and invest into this upcoming season, and I just believe that with two runners as talented as Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that they are going to find a way to have success. So that being said, when you're talking about Lamar Jackson, and even if he does lose those red zone possessions, or at least a portion of them, what type of option will he be for a fantasy quarterback? I think he's going to be just fine. And I think, driving up and down the field, Lamar on any drop back alone is a threat to run. So you take that as well as the fact that there are opportunities to be had as well in the designed run game. Is that where I expect Todd Monken in this offense to go? Probably not, but I also think that part of it as well is they are going to try and limit the amount of hits that Lamar takes slightly, which could possibly mean that the passing game could take on a little bit more prominence as well. And for their skill position players, from a fantasy football perspective, the majority of the attention is on Zay Flowers and the combinations of tight ends that they have in Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. I feel like for this game tonight, that Zay Flowers could be an excellent option. Like we just mentioned, Chiefs lost their number one cornerback in Sneed from last season. That in itself sort of could open up more opportunities for Zay Flowers, but I think that the lowest moment of Zay Flowers' rookie season probably came in that AFC Championship game when he fumbled into the end zone and out of bounds that went from scoring a touchdown or at least being on the 1 yard line to punch in a touchdown and instead resulted in a turnover that, again, he is probably thought about on repeat since that occurred, at least to some degree. So I think that the Ravens are going to try and establish some confidence with Zay Flowers in this game, let him get his get back a little bit, and try and, I wouldn't say force feed by any means, because I do think at the end of the day, this is going to be a team that tries to run the ball more than pass, but I think that Zay Flowers is going to get his opportunities to shine as well, and he is a very promising young player. I am a little bit skeptical about the tight ends for the Ravens. Last season with Mark Andrews getting injured, Isaiah Likely was able to emerge and ultimately was a very nice option for them. And I was also surprised as of this morning to look into the fact that Mark Andrews is still just 28 years old. So at first I was sort of running through scenarios in my head of, well, could the Ravens try and establish Isaiah Likely a little bit more if they know that Mark Andrews could be on his way out? But again, Andrews still just 28 years old. Both of the two players with 2 years left on their current deals. So it's not like the Ravens would totally benefit from the idea of kind of pushing Mark Andrews to the side and trying to establish this future with Isaiah Likely. At the end of the day, this season is about winning for the Ravens. That is all they care about. They are not trying to worry about the future development of players like Isaiah Likely. So I think that Likely is going to be a part of the Ravens game plan, which is very fair, but I think him and Andrews are going to split looks a little bit from that tight end possession. I do think that tight ends will be prominent at using the tight ends as well to their game if they are able to build up the run game like I'm anticipating. I think play action passes could be a massive part of their offense as well, and I think that that's where we could start to see as well the likes of Likely and Andrews. But like we talked about earlier, this is going to be a team that in the red zone, it's going to be very difficult to stop them in the run game. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are both excellent red zone threats, so there is that. I just worry a little bit about how they're going to be able to both get their share of consistent targets. So for fantasy owners, I understand both of them, very nice players, but I do worry a little bit about the overall share of targets for the two of them. And Anthony Manzano has a question about, does Baltimore have enough cap room with the massive amount of cap that Lamar's deal takes up? I mean, honestly, Lamar's contract isn't even all that bad in comparison to what a lot of these quarterback contracts that have come off the table this offseason are, with Jared Goff making over $50 million, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa. So I think that Baltimore has more than enough room. I also think that they've been one of the best development teams of the past handful of years. All of those names we just mentioned as well, in Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, those are all homegrown talents, along with the fact that Lamar Jackson has come miles as a passer from where he was coming out of Louisville. So yeah, Lamar, for most teams, if you have a good quarterback, it's going to take up a lot of cap space for you. But I think that the Ravens are more than capable enough to continue. And by the way, on that whole note of development, I give a lot of credit as well to Harbaugh to be able to, have that flexibility of adding cheaper rookie contracts along with that can still give you production alongside Lamar Jackson. And additionally, to your question about conference champions and division winners, we're going to be covering that in the next segment. So see you there, but we will get to that momentarily. On the other side of this particular matchup in regards to fantasy football implications, on the Chiefs side of this, I think there are a lot of questions about what this next generation or next few years for the Chiefs are going to look like once Travis Kelce is no longer Travis Kelce. And we saw somewhat of regression, at least in terms of production from Kelce last year. He saw his lowest amount of targets since 2016 and his lowest yards total since 2015. So in both of those cases, I believe that ultimately, I just think during the regular season at this point with Travis Kelce entering his age 35 season, I think he's kind of going to save himself a little bit. And it's not just the fact that he's 35 years old. It's that he's 35 years old coming off of back-to-back runs to the Super Bowl. So add on an additional month and a half or so of season every year for Travis Kelce. So I still think that if you drafted Travis Kelce, you shouldn't be panicked whatsoever, and you're not going to find a better option than him. I just don't think he is going to be the perennial number one fantasy tight end from here on out that he was for so many years. And ultimately, you can't write him off because he has continued to produce 100%, and the playoffs showed that with over 350, I think it was 335 or 350 yards, something along those lines, and a few touchdowns to that mix as well. But yeah, as well as Anthony says, Travis Kelce fan, I feel that the lack of trust from Patrick Mahomes for the other receivers' ability to catch the ball in critical moments is the reason why he uses Travis. Absolutely fair. And I think that anytime the Chiefs are, in the fourth quarter, in a pinch, looking for somebody to make a play, Mahomes is always going to look for Kelce. So again, I'm not trying to tear down his fantasy value. He's going to be in that upper echelon of group. I just think that with a lot of these younger tight ends as well coming into the picture, I think that we're going to see Kelce slow down his regular season production slightly. Last year was dealing with some injuries. And again, I think he's going to be totally fine in terms of when it ultimately matters for the Chiefs in the playoffs. Travis Kelce will be there, no problem, the all-time receptions leader in the NFL postseason. But that being said, regular season production, I do have some reservations with, just based off of the need as a whole. But again, when we're talking what does this look like for the Chiefs, if it's not going to be Travis Kelce, who is it going to be? Well, I think that the Chiefs would love to establish more of a prominent running game. I think that Isaiah Pacheco has shown a ton of promise these past couple years. He's one of my favorite running backs in the league. Obviously, the way that he runs with that anger and ferocity is, how can you not love that as a football fan? But I ultimately think that that Pacheco is in for a big season. That's a good offensive line in front of him as well. And the fact that you have Patrick Mahomes now with a couple deep threats in Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, that defenses aren't going to be able to play so close to the line of scrimmage, that they will have to respect the deep passing game, which truthfully, with Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I don't know if that was really the case last season. So I think there are going to be opportunities for Pacheco to become a monster for them. On the note of the receivers, I'm a lot more skeptical, I think, ultimately about the year one production of Xavier Worthy. I understand he does have the explosive upside, like I just mentioned. I just feel like we could definitely be looking at a season where Xavier Worthy is a little bit of a week-to-week basis in terms of hit or miss, and he will have his good moments, in my opinion. I'm not worried about that for him. I just don't know how much I would really rely on him as a receiver 1 or 2 from a fantasy football perspective. He can be a good flex option on a handful of occasions. I don't think that he is for this week in particular, with a talented secondary in Baltimore. And then Hollywood Brown as well is he's even lower than Xavier Worthy is on a lot of people's lists. And I just don't know if I love any of the matchups necessarily for the Chiefs for tonight's game. If anybody were to show themselves from a fantasy standpoint, Rashee Rice, I know obviously all of the off-the-field stuff and the legal troubles that he's gotten into, but now we're just talking about football here. He's not going to be suspended. He's going to be available, and I'm sure the Chiefs are probably keeping that in the back of their mind, that they could potentially lose Rice at some point with a suspension that probably won't take place, it sounds like, until next season. So ultimately, we'll have to see there. But again, the sort of must-plays from this game, I think, are going to be both of the quarterbacks in Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, Derrick Henry, and Travis Kelce. Outside of that, you have some flex options. Again, really like the idea of Zay Flowers and Xavier Worthy. a lot more middling on. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. But we're now going to get into my full list of predictions for this upcoming season. For the regular season, we'll be talking about all of the record predictions for all 32 NFL teams and what the playoff picture looks like. So we will dive into all of that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as I now want to submit here my final predictions for the upcoming regular season. We have been doing season previews for the past month or so, or even more than that, probably closer to 2 months now at this point, and a lot has happened since then. I've given my general thoughts on these teams, but I'm locking in now my predictions for all 32 NFL teams. And as we sort of look into this as well, when we're talking about the playoff picture, it is important to take into consideration that as much as we feel great about a lot of these teams, and especially the ones that are coming off of playoff appearances, the reality in the NFL is there is parity like no other league. Since the playoffs expanded to 14 teams in the 2021 postseason, there have been 7, and 8 teams in 2021, 22, and 23 respectively that have returned to the postseason following a playoff berth the year prior, which basically means that about half of the teams were not able to return to the playoffs the year afterwards, which again means that you can't just chalk in all of these same teams from the year before, because there are always surprise playoff berths in the NFL. Again, the unpredictability of it and the parity of the league is what makes it so special. So when you look at the list of teams from last year, you can feel great about a lot of them, and I do as well. I have 7 of 8 division winners repeating this year, and I feel terrible about that because, again, surprises are going to take place. So that being said, moving on here, these, for our video viewers here, these are all of the records that I predicted throughout the course of the past couple months when I was doing the team-by-team breakdown of their upcoming season. But in the past 48 hours, I've gone through the entire NFL slate a couple times and picked every single game, and ultimately, this is where I'm coming out here for the updated season predictions. And ultimately, there were some notable differences from when I first looked at their seasons to the second time. The biggest difference, for me at least, was the Dallas Cowboys, who initially I had winning 12 games and making their way back to the playoffs. But again, when you're talking about the fact that when there are red flags for these teams that made the playoffs last year, you have to really take into consideration what those could mean for the upcoming season. And for the Cowboys, I think that their offensive line got drastically worse, and I still don't have very much confidence in their running game. They just added James Cook, or Dalvin Cook, I should say, the other week. him and Ezekiel Elliott, if we're talking 2018 or so, this is an elite backfield, but it's subpar at this point behind what is legitimately, and they're still young, so we'll see what happens, but I think could be one of the worst offensive lines. You lose a bunch of key defensive personnel members that I do not have the Cowboys making the playoffs this season. I have them going in the range of 8 and 9, and they could be slightly better, but that being said, I think in both the AFC and the NFC this year, we could be looking at a situation where you need 10 wins to make the playoffs. And Cowboys, again, definitely on the table. I was very high on them when I first looked at the roster, but thinking further and going through the schedule, I just feel like this is a situation where there's already so much turmoil taking place in Dallas. It's been a very loud offseason. I don't think that they have what it takes to repeat. Other than that, there are games in and out from here and there. Ultimately, I'm trying to think what other key different results I have. Again, I don't love the fact that I have 7 of 8 division winners repeating again, because that's not typically the way that it goes about this. I think that ultimately I feel very confident in the Chiefs and the 49ers to win their divisions. Outside of that, there's a toss-up. I'd probably put the Falcons in there as well, but I still think that there is an unknown factor with Kirk Cousins coming into this season and a lot of a new regiment that things could get a little bit dicey for them. Even the Ravens, who were, in my opinion, the best team in the NFL last season for the regular season, that ultimately they're playing in a tough division. So I don't know if I can necessarily lock them in to winning their division. One thing that did change, though, is I have the Bears winning 10 games this season, which I think is a little bit more of a trendy pick than a hot take. I think a lot of people are sort of coming on board to the Bears this upcoming season. I think that their roster is very talented on both sides of the ball. And I do think that they are going to be a good defense to the point where Caleb Williams, with all of the different weapons that he has, should be very capable of putting together a significantly improved offense in 2024 relative to 2023. So I think that they are also going to make a push at the playoffs. But looking at specifically the AFC teams that I am locking in for this season, I have the Chiefs, Ravens, Texans, and Bills all winning their divisions. Again, all repeat division winners from last season. Sketches me out a little bit. I think that ultimately the Bills and the Ravens both playing in 2 pretty talented divisions as well. We could absolutely see them get knocked off, but I think that it's going to be very close there. I have the Browns making the playoffs once again, and then I have 2 new additions to the AFC playoffs this year. I have the Cincinnati Bengals bouncing back, hopefully with a full season of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. That last year they were in the mix, even with Burrow dealing with injuries for a handful of the weeks. I think that the Bengals have an excellent chance this upcoming season. They also added a little bit of veteran leadership to that secondary that should help improve their defense that I thought underachieved last season but has a chance to take a step forward. And I do have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who after their 2022 postseason appearance were unable to do so last year, in large part, in my opinion, due to Trevor Lawrence's injury, that I think they have a bounce-back season. This is a little bit make or break for Doug Peterson, and ultimately, I do believe in the Trevor Lawrence once he's fully healthy, and I understand that a lot of people think that he's overpaid, and he could still be good and overpaid at the same time, but I believe in the upside there. I think this season he's able to put it together. They now finally have all of the pieces, hopefully, to They might not have a true wide receiver one, but that being said, I do love Brian Thomas Jr. that they drafted in the first round out of LSU. I'm not saying he's going to be wide receiver one this upcoming season, but I think that he has star potential and could be a little bit of diamond in the rough is a little dramatic considering the fact that he still was a first-round pick, but with all of the love that was given to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, each of the top 10 wide receivers that were drafted, Brian Thomas Jr. could absolutely star for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then in the NFC, I have the 49ers, Eagles, and Lions, again repeating as division winners. And I have the Atlanta Falcons winning the NFC South. Not too much of a surprise there either. That is where most people are going. But I have the Packers being the first wild card team in. And then a couple surprise-ish picks of I'm high on the Arizona Cardinals this season. And this is the one where I could definitely see this blowing up in my face. But I think they're frisky. I like the idea of if Kyler Murray can stay healthy, a lot of people are underrating what a fully functioning Kyler Murray can do as a dual threat quarterback. Now, can he avoid taking the hits, getting hurt that ultimately lead to, even when he's in the games and limited from a running perspective, we do see a drop-off. But ultimately, I think that he now has the best receiver. I know DeAndre Hopkins was on the team, but we're not talking prime D-Hop when he was on the Cardinals. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be an excellent combination along with Kyler Murray. We saw Trey McBride take positive steps forward last season. And I am such a believer in their head coach, Zach Gannon, who went out and got sort of spot starters to help out on that defense. It's not like they went out and acquired all that much star talent, but they were able to just fill in some needed holes. And I think the defensive strategist that is Zach Gannon, I think he's going to be able to help the Cardinals surprise a lot of people this upcoming season. And like I mentioned, the Bears as well. I wouldn't say this is so much of a hot take as it is sort of hopping on the trendy picks that already sort of have been coming out with the Bears. You need surprise teams, again, in the playoffs. It's an average of just over six new playoff teams per year. I wasn't able to get quite there. I have 5 new playoff teams from last season to this year. But again, let me know as we go back here just to the final overall projections for this upcoming season. You're going to have surprise teams making the playoffs. Other teams that I think could be in consideration, I think the New York Jets have a great chance. When I initially mapped out their season, I was a little bit more skeptical. I had them 8-9. I think 9-8 is going to be competitive, that they're going to have a chance to make the playoffs, but I think you're going to need 10 wins. I also notably have the Miami Dolphins out of the playoff picture as well, and that's a situation where I really like Mike McDaniel, and it feels like after him getting this new contract, with Tua getting his new contract, that there is going to be some significant pressure on the Dolphins to have success this upcoming season, but the reality of the situation for the Dolphins is, and as much as I believe in McDaniel, the coach, I'm not a huge Tua fan, and they had some turnover as well on the defensive side of the ball from a coordinator perspective, and we are really yet to see them go out and beat good quarterbacks on the other end. It's been a lot of sort of beating up on the lesser competition, but being unable to play up to the competition of the best teams in the league. That's what I think is going to be crucial for the Miami Dolphins this upcoming season. Again, I do have them out of the playoff race. They're most certainly going to be in contention for that, but Again, you got to have some surprises for the upcoming season because, as we know, the NFL is never just exactly what you think headed into the year. But let me know what your thoughts are on my overall predictions here. We're going to now move on to some regular season award predictions coming off of this as well. So we will dive into that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as now I want to look ahead to the upcoming season and look at some predictions for regular season awards. We're going to be running through of all of the individual player awards for this upcoming season and talking about who the key candidates are and ultimately making picks there. So we're going to start off with Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think it's going to be Caleb Williams. He is the favorite right now, according to DraftKings, plus 135, and I think that this is a little bit of a boring pick, but I think it's the right pick. And as long as he is fully healthy, he's in just about the best possible situation relative to his other peers that were drafted at the top of the first round as well. If there's any other quarterbacks in contention, that's where the award usually ends up as opposed to going to a running back and a wide receiver. I think that Caleb is going to have the best season out of all of the rookie quarterbacks. You look across the board here, there were 6 drafted in the first round, but J.J. McCarthy is out for the season. Drake May isn't expected to start for some time. Michael Penix isn't expected to be seen at all, so you can already somewhat eliminate them. And then it feels like the race is really between Caleb, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix. Maybe you have a little bit of love for Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, which is fair, but that being said, I think that Caleb Williams is far and away in the best position to succeed in year one. We talked about this in the past. I think over the past decade plus that this is the best situation that a first overall quarterback has walked into, at least since I have started watching football. The last time I think there was anything even, near as comparable was maybe Cam Newton when he first came in with the Panthers. Maybe you want to make an argument for Kyler Murray in 2019 with the Cardinals, but ultimately, I think for Caleb Williams coming in with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, a good running back room, and a solid offensive line, that's everything you can really ask for. And if the Bears are winning games too, he's going to get that extra amount of media love. That I like Daniels, but there's a lot more uncertainty with, they just traded away what was supposed to be their number 2 wide receiver a few weeks ago in Jahan Dotson. I'm still a little bit uncertain about Cliff Kingsbury and whether or not he can be a play caller at the NFL level. We'll see. Ultimately, I don't want to overreact or anything to preseason, and I think that he was in over his head for sure when he was hired as the head coach of the Cardinals. We'll see what this second stint looks like for him, but I don't know about that. I think that Bo Nix at plus 1,000 is actually decent odds there. I just don't love the skill position players that are surrounding him. It would take a lot for him to overtake Caleb Williams. If he produces and the Broncos overachieve a little bit and Caleb doesn't live up to expectation, the doors could be open, but that's just a lot of things to sort of break right for him. But that being said, I think that Sean Payton can put him in a good position moving forward here. Defensive Rookie of the Year. Top 3 candidates based off of odds: Laiatu Latu of the Colts, Dallas Turner of the Vikings, Jared Verse of the Rams. I'm a big fan of all 3 of them. And I will throw Terrion Arnold, cornerback for the Detroit Lions, in the mix as well. He's 5th in odds at plus 1,200 that I think could be pretty good value there, considering the fact that the Lions, their secondary has been their biggest weakness over the past couple seasons. And if he steps in and has an immediate impact, the media love could sort of pick him up there. But ultimately, I don't feel super strongly about this. I like Laiatu Latu a lot, but to steer away from going with the number 1 favorite in this, I'm going to go with Dallas Turner. And I think that he is due for a very big rookie season, considering the fact that he's playing in a Brian Flores defense that loves to blitz, that just invested into a number of different edge rushers in Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. And I think that there's a very good chance that we could see Dallas Turner be able to sort of clean up plays here and rack up a good amount of sacks as well that statistically could put him above some of these others. The one thing I would be concerned about is I don't know if he's going to get as many sacks as Laiatu Latu. So if Latu is fully healthy, I think that is an excellent pick and I would not argue against it. There is a little bit of a risk in the health bet of Latu, considering his injury history, but ultimately, I think that this is going to be a very good Defensive Rookie of the Year race. Obviously, we didn't see any defensive players taken for the first 14 picks, I believe it was, of the 2024 draft. So it's not like there are any sky-high expectations or any players that are expected to, light the world on fire, light the NFL on fire in year 1. But I think that Dallas Turner can definitely rack up some counting stats for sure in the sack department. Offensive Player of the Year. Top 3 in odds: Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, and CeeDee Lamb. I do like CeeDee Lamb a lot, considering that he is far and away the best playmaker on that offensive side of the ball for the Cowboys. That he is going to get a ton of looks this upcoming season, and I think he is going to, last year you saw the stats that he put up. I think he's going to put up similar production this upcoming season. That being said, I'm going to go with Ja'Marr Chase, and I'm a little bit nervous about it because of the fact that Chase is currently holding out. Now, he did return to practice yesterday. We'll see whether or not he does play this upcoming weekend against the Patriots, but, the last time we saw him and Burrow both healthy was Chase's rookie season in 2021. He put up over 1,400 yards and caught 13 touchdowns in that rookie year. Ultimately, again, if they're both available, I feel really good about what we could see from Ja'Marr Chase. It's hard taking him over CeeDee Lamb, where I know Lamb is going to get also an extensive amount of targets, but I'm going a little bit on a limb here with the longer odds in Ja'Marr Chase, but CeeDee Lamb is also a very good bet as well. But now moving on to Defensive Player of the Year. This is a tough one because ultimately I think it comes down to 2 people, and they're both tied for number 1 in odds according to DraftKings. So I'm not really going out on much of a limb here. It's between TJ Watt and Micah Parsons, in my opinion. Now, I love me some Max Crosby as well. He's 3rd at plus 700, but Watt and Parsons, I think it's going to come down to the 2 of them. And I think that a little bit based off of previous events, TJ Watt has won a Defensive Player of the Year award. A lot of debates as to whether or not he should have 1 or 2 extra in there. And we're going to have a situation this year as well where we could be looking at TJ Watt versus somebody who has never won a Defensive Player of the Year award before, and that could be, something that sort of skews away from Watt. But ultimately, I think that I'm picking TJ Watt. Just the impact that he has when he is on the field for the Steelers is felt maybe more than any other defensive player in the NFL, at least wins are not an individual stat, let alone a defensive end / linebacker stat. But, I mean, the Steelers are just so much better when TJ Watt is on the field. And ultimately, I think the fact that he has been sort of turned away these past couple years could ultimately mean that he is due for a Defensive Player of the Year award. And then finally, MVP. When we're looking at the top odds for this upcoming season, Patrick Mahomes, the significant favorite at plus 475, followed up by CJ Stroud and Josh Allen. Joe Burrow, I think, also has a great chance to take this home, but my pick is Jalen Hurts, and I don't feel great about it necessarily, but I think that the Eagles are going to have a lot of success this upcoming season. I know all of the drama that's gone on behind the scenes there in Philadelphia, but I think that this is going to be the year that Nick Sirianni, almost coaching for his job to some degree at least, knows that he has to sort of fully turn over the offense to Jalen Hurts to let Hurts evolve the offense the way that he was hoping to last season, now with Kellen Moore. I think that the Eagles are going to be at the top of the NFL for best record in the league. I think that that's probably not a bad bet in itself, and Hurts is going to have, last year he was dealing with injuries as well, specifically that knee injury. I think he's going to be in a better position this year. I think he has the weapons, and ultimately I have him winning the MVP. His odds there are plus 1,200. Another long shot that I do actually really like is Jared Goff at plus 2,000, and Jared Goff MVP just does not sound right. But that being said, I believe it's something like 13 or 14 out of the 17 games for the Lions this year are in a dome. Jared Goff, his numbers are significantly better when playing in a dome, and the Lions are going to have a good regular season. Now, again, it's not my pick necessarily. I don't know if he's going to have the stats like that to rival some of the other best in the NFL, and I also, even if he does, I don't know if he's necessarily going to get that level of respect from the voters, but I think it's a sneaky long shot bet as well at plus 2,000. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, what your predictions for this upcoming season are. Again, it's pretty hard to pick these things preseason, but wanted to have a little bit of fun with it, not go full chalk all the way across. But again, let me know what your thoughts are as we are going to head into our final segment, and when we come back on the other side, we are going to be discussing some big picture NFL questions that we could get a little bit more of an answer from with this weekend of football. So we will be diving into that, but first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where I want to talk about some of the lingering questions headed into the NFL season and talk about what we could learn about these questions from the Week 1 performances. And to start off here, the first question I want to dive into is that not that it will, any of these really will be fully answered in week 1 alone, but I'm looking at that game between the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars and wondering, will the Dolphins or Jags feel more confident about their quarterback extensions that they handed out in the summer in the long term? Like I mentioned, the two teams facing off against one another, Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa both getting lucrative contract extensions, and it, for both of them, very polarizing among a lot of NFL fans, and for good reason, because neither one of them, and although they have both made the playoffs, Tua a couple times, Trevor Lawrence just once, but was able to win a game that year, NFL fans are waiting for some more consistency from either one of them. I think the consistency is the key word with them because we've seen individual moments of greatness. I think more so with Trevor Lawrence. The difference is that Tua has been able to put together ultimately the more impressive seasons as a whole. So they kind of get compared to each other a lot. Again, both top picks in each of their drafts 1 year apart. Both play in Florida for whatever it's worth. And again, it's just this idea of them rising up in these key moments. Can we expect that from them long term? Now, both of their franchises think that that is the case. I've been on record saying that I think that the Trevor Lawrence deal was a little bit more of a no-brainer in comparison to the Tua deal. But it's not like I would, slam the table saying that I believe that 100% there are no doubts about either one of these contracts. I feel good about Trevor Lawrence, but that being said, again, we're sort of waiting on all of the expectations and the hype that was coming up for him entering that 2021 draft to actually come to fruition, because he was touted as the best prospect since Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck made an instant impact on the Indianapolis Colts, and we have not seen that from Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars. Obviously, there have been other circumstances as well for Lawrence that have gotten in the way. The Urban Meyer experiment in year 1 was a disaster that I don't think any quarterback could have overcome. That being said, it's just been a lot of inconsistency. And even in Trevor Lawrence, with his playoff win and with the really good second half performance to lead a comeback against the Chargers in the 2022 playoffs, he also was a bit of a mess in that first half, and he was a big part of the reason as to why the Jaguars were in that hole. And he got a little bit of assistance as well on the other side from Brandon Staley and the Chargers to not be able to close out that game. So ultimately, I think both of these quarterbacks still have a lot to prove. They just got their money, so at the end of the day, what you or I say about them will not have a financial implication on, their lives. But that being said, they just got paid. Now is when the pressure cooker really starts to heat up for both of them. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting game to watch the two of them face off against one another and see what we can deduct out of that. Speaking of young quarterbacks looking to prove themselves, how long will the acclimation process take for Caleb Williams? Because Caleb is another one of these extremely highly touted quarterback prospects of the past, decade or so. And he is stepping into a situation that we talked about earlier in the show. I think that this is the best situation a number one draft pick quarterback has stepped into as long as I've been watching football. And ultimately, with all of the different targets that he has, with the running game behind him, Caleb Williams is expected to be special immediately, but should we be putting him on that pedestal already? It's not like I was very encouraged from the preseason performances that I don't have an issue with it, but it's not like it was flawless all the way through. In the second game, it took him a little bit to get that offense actually operating at the level that they were hoping for, and it's a preseason game, so even if he was excellent, you can only take so much out of it. But that being said, I think that the Bears have a very good chance of making the playoffs this year. But in order to do so, they're going to have to hold their own against teams like the Packers and the Lions within their own division. And like I mentioned, I think it's probably going to take something like 10 playoff wins in order for a team to make the playoffs in the NFC. So ultimately speaking here, there isn't that much time for Caleb Williams to be able to work himself into the season. Now, it's not like he has to be, a top 10 quarterback in week 1, but if the Bears are going to have success, and I wouldn't say specifically if the Bears are going to have success, he has to be excellent, because I do think that this is actually a very talented roster as a whole. So it's not like it all has to be on his shoulders, but as the season starts to ramp up and we get further into this, we are going to sort of be looking at Caleb to say, hey, when things get messy, can you elevate at a higher level this early on in your career? And we're coming off of Hard Knocks as well, where obviously that can tend to be a little propaganda-y, not by the job of HBO. I think they do an excellent job there in the production of that show. It's just a matter of, as NFL fans, especially while we're so starved for football content, that sometimes we can get a little bit carried away with ourselves, but I'm removing the Hard Knocks conversation from that entirely, because I think the Bears showed that they were headed in the right direction down the stretch of last year, where their defense was playing like a top 10 group in the league, and really just what they need is a little bit more consistency at that quarterback position. Justin Fields, I'm rooting for him in Pittsburgh, absolutely, but that being said, the lack of responsibility and the turnovers late in the games are really what hurt him, in my opinion. And Caleb Williams, for as much as people talk about how much of a drastic upgrade he is over Justin Fields, and I do think that he's an upgrade, he has some of those same tendencies to try too hard to make something happen, to try and superhero it himself, hold on to the ball too long, take hits he shouldn't hit, and ultimately just making the right plays, making the safe plays. That's all the Bears need to be able to take the next step this upcoming season. Again, I personally am a believer in it, but what's that going to look like? He starts the season off with a few AFC South opponents at home against the Titans. Now, then on the road in Houston for what is going to be the Sunday Night Football game. A ton of eyes are going to be on him by that point. So can he live up to the expectations there? He then has London a few weeks later against the Jaguars week 6. So it's a situation where ultimately the Bears are going to have eyes on them, and Caleb Williams in particular is going to be expected to do the incredible. I'm sure when you listen to him talk and such, he's confident that he's able to do it. I'm confident in him to be able to pull through, but again, how long is that process going to take? Because primetime game in week 2, after maybe a little bit of a tune-up game against the Titans, the pressure is absolutely going to be on. And then the last question here is, can Deshaun Watson once again become a dependable starter? The ship has sailed for me in terms of him being a superstar once again. I just think that, how often is it that we get to see 4 years pass between him being, any athlete, being a superstar and then miraculously coming back from that after, it's not even like Watson's been, yes, last season was injury plagued, but it's not like that was the reason why he hasn't been a star since 2020. There's a whole lot of baggage to that question that we're not going to dive into right now, but I think Watson is in a pretty good situation in Cleveland, where he has some weapons. Amari Cooper, David Njoku, they go out and they trade for Jerry Jeudy, who, listen, Jeudy, yes, didn't live up to being a first-round selection, but is very capable of being a solid wide receiver too. Once Nick Chubb comes back, you will have a running game with a good offense and maybe the best running back in all of football, but he won't be back for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. Can Watson, sort of lead that offense by himself some to take them to the next level? I'm not sure how I feel about it. Again, I'm not asking for him to be excellent. I'm asking for him to be average, to And at that point, he's never going to live up to that contract. At least in my opinion, he's not going to live up to the contract that he signed when he went to Cleveland, along with the picks that Cleveland traded in order to acquire him. But they were a playoff team last year with a bit of a mess at that quarterback position, which included him, but especially once he went down as well, they were rotating through different options, and ultimately it was Joe Flacco who was able to get the job done. Deshaun Watson, can you match what a 40-year-old Joe Flacco did last year? The hope is that he can, but we will have to see. But a whole lot to be excited about for this upcoming NFL season, and finally it is upon us with the game tonight. Coverage starts at 8:20 p.m., so we will be very much anticipating that for the next handful of hours. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, wherever you keep up with us. Share us with your friends as well. And we will be back tomorrow afternoon, same time as always, at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that